She's also going to be here with me joining on today's podcast. This podcast is we're going to be focusing on illegal immigration and both legal and illegal immigration on this podcast. So we'll get started in just a little bit once we get our live on all accounts, and then we'll give you the rundown of what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, hey everyone. So my ex decided not to work. So I'm actually going to try to go live on my ex account from right over here. We've just been having an interesting day.
Oh my gosh.
So hang on, let me just get this going. You guys are getting real and raw today. So my name's Lynz Loomis, and we're so glad you're here. So those of you that are tuning in on Rumble, we're about to go live on X. And hopefully we'll just kind of see what happens. I think I'm going to do a spaces actually.
And just multiple cameras going on, guys. So if you see me looking here, this is TikTok. If you see me looking here, this is Rumble, Facebook family, welcome in. And our other networks. I think we're on Twitter, X now too. So welcome in, guys. Yeah, we had some technical difficulties. We're supposed to start at 2 p.m., but we got held back by the tech part of this. This is the first time we're ever launching my first, ever podcast. It's just like Aisha Speaks Truth. And I guess, Lynz, while we're waiting on getting something set up with her, I'll introduce myself just a little bit, guys. You know where my background is from and the topic we're covering today. So I'm Aisha, and I'm a Christian conservative, a wife, a mom of 2 with 1 on the way. We have a baby girl on the way we're super excited about. And I originally got my start in social media as a beauty and fashion creator. And from there, I felt like the Lord was calling me out to step into using my platform to bring understanding to current events that are taking place in our nation. And personally, I am fed up with the mainstream media's half lies and half their lies and half truth, and especially this attack on conservative values and the MAGA movement. So what my podcast do, we are going to confront the politics, we're going to confront culture as well as global events, but do that all through the lens of research, scripture, and prayer. So my husband, alongside him, he is a youth pastor, and we are building our family's foundation on the unshakable foundation of Jesus Christ. And we believe more than ever that is what our nation needs in this time, is that same type of unshakable foundation. And so on my podcast, we are not going to be afraid to talk about the truth of what's happening in our nation. We're going to bring about the solutions as well. When we talk about those things, how we can be active in our community, and then also space for conservative voices. So if you are looking for a sister in Christ who's not going to back down, and going to stand with you when it comes to our biblical values, upholding the Constitution, and bringing to light the things that are happening in our nation, but also trying to figure out a solution that we can all come up with and work together, both sides, left and the right. Then hit the follow button or subscribe, depending on where you're watching from. And let's do this. Let's make America great again together. I do have with me a great friend of mine. She is an investigative journalist. Her name is Lynz Loomis. She has an extensive background, has done extensive work at our border. And she's going to bring some insight into our conversation today, which our topic today is on illegal immigration. But since this is such a global impact, thanks so much for those. I'm getting emojis on TikTok. So since this is a global impact, and what I like to do when we talk about what the president is doing in our nation, it's always going to have a global impact. And so we can't just focus on one side of the issue without also talking about the other. And so in this conversation, what we want to do is dive in both in illegal immigration, but also talk about the effects of the legal side of it too, which we have a major delay on for people that are trying to do it the right way. So we also want to tackle those and see what we can do. Lynz is going to bring her insight into this because she's so knowledgeable on this topic. She's a really good friend of mine. And like I mentioned, she has an amazing background. So Lynz, I am going to pass it over to you if you want to share a little bit about yourself before we dive right into the topic for today. And I'm just going to give you guys, or we're just going to start with our first question and dive into the topic for today, which is, again, legal and illegal immigration.
Absolutely. So I will just say, for those of, some of those that know both of us, we're going to be talking about some very controversial things. Know that, there's love in the message, but I am unapologetically truthful about these things. And so that's where I'm going to stand. A little bit about me. I am a mom, a wife, and I also have authored a book, and I've spent a lot of time just in the anti-trafficking space. I escaped at 16 and a half, and I love Jesus so much. And I love my country. So there's, I've ran for office and there's some other things there, but just bringing the truth forward, specifically, and I'm also a private investigator. That's not really been widely known. I stepped into that last year because I think it's important to expose corruption inside church and government. And so, anyways, that's kind of where I stand. And sorry about all of the, I guess, the glitches in the back, but thank you so much for tuning in here today.
Yeah. Awesome. So when we talk about illegal immigration, Lynz, I would like to know what drew you to investigate the border crisis personally, and what did you witness during your time at the border?
Yeah, so what led me to it was, I started my run for U.S. Congress in 21, and I was hearing all about the borders. And of course, I don't want to be the one that just tells people what they want to hear or lie to people. If I'm running, I want to be truthful about what's actually going on. And at the time, you had some people that were going down to the border just to get pictures, but I actually wanted to see firsthand what was happening. So I made my first trip down into Arizona. I had close protection go with me. I almost didn't come home. It was very dangerous. And during that time in 21, I actually saw with my own eyes. We went to different parts in Arizona. We went in the desert. We spent different days in different locations. I literally, in one town, border town, I actually had the cartel following behind me with the close protection guy that was with me. I went into a store, kind of, looking at some things. But what I found was that there are children that have been drugged, and now we know it's out publicly, but are drugged with things like Dramamine, and they are raped. Their diapers are hung on trees as trophies. Women are also raped. If they fight it, they're murdered. It's like a down payment essentially to get through the border. And you'll see their blood torn underwear on the trees. You'll see these things, and this is something that law enforcement that I've spoken with, even here in the Low Country. A former law enforcement officer knows about rape trees here in America from like 10, 15 years ago. This is not something that just grew overnight. And so what I found out was that Catholic Charities was actually helping through taxpayer funds get these children trafficked through the border, giving them to unvetted sponsors. The reason President Trump in his last term was doing DNA testing was because a lot of the times if someone came through with a child and there was a male and a female, then they bypass the regular entry points and they go through an NGO like Catholic Charities. And they assume it's a family. They know perfectly well it's not. And during that year, a good friend of mine and colleague that serves on a board with me, Tara Rodas, testified before Congress about children who had gone missing. Whistleblowers came forward. And so I brought this message back. I mean, there's even like rape kits that are given to women that have the morning after pill and some of these things in there. There's all types of things. But what we found when I came back with the camera footage of the rape trees, and I even saw, I was taken through one area that was very remote where this veteran actually has used cameras where he captures videos of the people coming across the border. And I saw the footage of the cartel getting a Middle Eastern individual male across, like just hopping over the border. In some places of the border, we saw all the old, and all of the supplies that were supposed to be used to build the border wall, and they were getting wasted to the wayside. I saw open areas where people could just walk through. But in this particular video, this person was taken across, and I was told by this man that he sent the camera footage to a government agency who did facial recognition, and 3 months later, that Middle Eastern man was caught in Washington, D.C., and was on the terrorist watch list. So they knew that this stuff was already happening before the influx of the millions of people that came across the border. And so when I came back to South Carolina and I reported on this, the Republican Party shut me down in multiple places. They silenced me. They said, "Oh my gosh, you can't talk about this. It's too brutal reality." And I'm like, really? So what about the kids that are their organs are being harvested from them? I mean, we have American side and the other side of the border. So this is what I personally found. I was silenced and shut down in a lot of areas, mocked and ridiculed. And I said, mark my words, 2 to 4 years, there's not going to just be thousands. There will be hundreds of thousands of children missing, which has now been reported by an OIG report by our own government. And that's a track. There's probably way more than that.
Yeah, it's over 448,000 children that have been trafficked that they have no account for. So when you went to the border, this was around 2021, right? So this is under, am I correct?
It was under Biden, yes. And then I went to McAllen later that year as well.
So this is where we have an open border policy under Biden. And the issue is not immigration itself. This is because immigration has been happening for years. The issue is mass migration, because then the country doesn't have, per se, a set up infrastructure, systems in play. And this allows, when we don't have those specific systems that we need in play to protect people coming here, for example, children that were accompanied, minors coming over the border, we don't have protection for them. We don't have enough infrastructure. We don't have those systems in play. Then you have cartels, gang members.
Hey, Aisha.
Yeah.
You froze for a moment, so can you go back and repeat what we've always had immigration?
Yeah, okay, sorry. So we've always had, I'm just going to repeat it for the people that didn't hear it, but we've always had immigration, like I mentioned, it's worldwide. It's always happened. People migrate from different places to another, but like I mentioned, the issue is mass migration because, again, a country is usually not prepared for that. I mean, when you think about, for example, the tragedy happening in Venezuela, where you have Venezuelans not only coming to the United States, but they're also going to Chile, Brazil, and different other places, and they're experiencing the same thing where there's a mass migration of people that need assistance, but then there's also corruption as well in the middle of that. And then when you have this mass migrations of millions of people coming to a border and you don't have the infrastructure, plus at the same time, Biden had already cut funding for ICE. So, and also changed the entire strategy of what ICE was supposed to be doing. And so then we have them basically doing this catch and release thing during the Biden administration instead of actually detaining individuals. They were caught, then they were released into the United States and then potentially able to take up residence and et cetera and benefit from different programs and systems that we have here, which put a drain on our system because, again, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the systems in play to take care of the mass amount of people coming over. And this is why open border policy can be very dangerous. And then when you don't have those systems in your nation set up, you know the people that's going to take advantage of that? The people that are corrupt. That's the cartel members, that's the gang members, and that's what we see happen in our nation. And so, under the Biden administration, we saw, there's human trafficking, there's drug trafficking, of course, there's child sex trafficking as well, all that taking place underneath this open border policy. And so, and then now we get to the Trump administration and he's hard after this. And now there's so much criticism because he's left with a mess to fix. So we had Biden who got rid of the Remain in Mexico, those types of asylum, which basically said that people coming over from Mexico, you have to stay in Mexico until your claim in court has been processed. He removed that. So then, that those people coming over for the asylum, then you got, like I mentioned, catch and release. And the catch and release system I thought was very interesting because when I did some research on that, Lynz, what I found is that agents were reporting this basically discouragement because they couldn't necessarily do the job they signed up for, right? And so they signed up to protect the border and they were not able to do that under the Biden administration. And so there was a sense of a disconnect and even interagencies not able to cooperate together because the policies were different for them to operate, how they were supposed to do their job. And again, if you got cut funding, for ICE, imagine like you don't have the resources. Now you have to be selective on the people that you even take in. And so, then we have also under Biden, there is the border wall construction that Trump initiated, that was halted as well. So I'm going to go with this. The result of the Biden administration policy is now we have cartels loaded more people per vehicle, increasing profit and danger. We had smuggling surges, human trafficking rings adapted quickly, and they rerouting or timing their crossings based on border patrol. I've watched a documentary on this where they literally timed that. For example, helicopters, like I believe it was a helicopter, but just let's say it's a helicopter. They timed in the documentary that every 30 minutes they had to refuel, right? So they would time these are people are super organized. Okay. So they would time when there would be lapse in the border patrol. And that's how they would end up, doing the smuggling, under the Biden administration. And again, you have less funding, so less people working there at the border. And then you have this discouragement from the Border Patrol agents who can't even do the job they signed up for because now they're under new administration that's giving them a different policy and a different objective than the prior. And then, Lynz, what are we not being told about the wall, asylum loopholes, and cartel activity? If you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so I'll also say, also goes back to the local level. Perfect example right here in our own state, Charleston, South Carolina. The former Charleston mayor was a sanctuary city. So that means that when she came in as acting sheriff, she was part of one of the ICE centers, detainment centers getting shut down. And then, in addition to that, there was also a policy that was brought forward by another individual that actually reduced the amount of enforcement officers. She actually ran for Congress against Nancy Mace in the last primary. So there is a number of things. And now, where you just had like one cartel leader that was over all of America, now you've got multiple of cartel people, but now you've got, you know, at least the law enforcement with gangs, and I'm not saying I'm for gangs, but they stayed in their areas. So now you've got the cartel that have no code at all. You've got different mafia groups now, like Russian mafia, Albanian mafia, Italian mafia, trying to keep their grounds in here in America. And there is a surge in these things. And look, the cartel don't care, but you got to also think about the Islamic State. There has been ties with the Islamic State and the cartel working together. And you've got Republicans and Democrats working with entities like the Council on American and Islamic Relations in South Carolina, who is on the terrorist watch list on legislation for a hate crimes bill that will basically, it puts out a welcome mat for Sharia. And so, when you can think about the cartel, you had a lot of Middle Eastern terrorists come across that border. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of Chinese Communist Party entities come across the border. And so you saw all this money that Data Republican on X exposed through the U.S. aid, exposed all these NGOs that were releasing our taxpayer dollars. So taxpayer funded, our taxpayer dollars funding all of these operations. And I will also add to this, that there has been evidence that has come out, and now there's a whistleblower from Biden's former administration that the auto pen was in effect. So essentially, he was probably not running the White House. He had several signers of this auto pen, some that claimed to be Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, and like chief of staff. I think there was Anita Cobbs or something like that. But these individuals were probably the ones running this whole criminal enterprise. So where the Ukraine used to be the largest one of the largest human trafficking areas, America is by and large the largest. We are the go-to in distribution and receiving. And, that's based on data that we're getting that has been reported.
And so then we get to, with this open border policy, we see a lot of of corruption also take place. And this is not even open border is not even a biblical concept either. When you look throughout the Bible, you always see that. Even Acts 17:26, it talks about him setting borders in place and setting the exact place for us to live. And then throughout the entire Old and New Testament, you see that even Joseph, for example, who was second in command to Pharaoh, asked for permission for his brothers to live in Goshen, and they had to state the reason that they were going to be there and what the work is that they were going to do. So there's this permission to allow people in. And when you look at Leviticus, there's another scripture that talks about that when you see when a foreigner or sojourner comes to your country to live with you, to welcome him in. But when you look at that Hebrew word, that's not saying like somebody that's illegal. That is saying a legal resident, somebody that you gave legal authority to be in your country. So I mean, it's a way to protect the nation and the borders, the culture, etc. within that nation, and also the people that are coming over. Because again, we have a lot of children that are unaccompanied. They go missing. Cartel members swoop them up once they get over the border, and God knows where they are and what's happening to them. And there's a crisis now on our hands. And for us to be the biggest nation in the world, the greatest nation in the world, with this type of thing that we haven't yet dealt with is very, very concerning and sad that we would allow for over 400,000 children to go missing like this.
And that's just what's on reports. I mean, and these people are being handed over, according to whistleblowers, are being handed directly over to unvetted male sponsors, female sponsors, and they know that they're being trafficked. I mean, one of the people that blew the whistle, there was a 12-year-old boy that had to wear diapers because of how tore up he was after being raped repeatedly by these disgusting people. Now, do I believe that God can redeem these people? Yes. So, but these people are criminals. That is why we have to have borders. And I mean, you name one country. I mean, let's just pick China. Can I go to China as a foreigner and just just go across their borders, take advantage of all of their benefits as a non-China citizen, or in Denmark or one of these other places, and live there at the taxpayers' fees? Can I do that? No, they don't allow you to just cross the border illegally. So, I really don't have grace for this, except for the extreme circumstances of, asylum, like these South African farmers, where their president is calling for their genocide.
And we'll have to talk about that another day, because that's a whole other. But so we think about the Trump administration. So now we move forward where we see the effect of the open border policy within our nation under Biden, unfortunately, and then Trump is now elected, and we see now crossings down 94 to 99% down within the first 3 months because of how hard he went after this, and an increased budget, of course, was sent to ICE, and cartel systems have been disrupted, of course, which I think is something else to dialogue about too, because now we don't have anyone, we have this self-deport program right now that Donald Trump was in that one big bill that was just passed by the states, the House Representatives, sorry. But we have in that, it tells you that the ICE agents will receive a bonus, as well. We see that people that are self-deport themselves, they will receive a $1,000 stipend, and also a ride back home if they do that legally, and also an ability to come back to the United States legally through a legal process. And we didn't see that before under Obama. We saw, I know he had a strong border policy in terms of, getting illegal immigrants and then some, because American citizens were also deported under him. I think it was like around 3,600 American citizens counted under him that were also wrongfully deported. Again, that was lack of due process, a lot of erroneous things that took place. When you think about Mark Little case, for example, under Obama, he was an American citizen, but a prison intake officer put that he was from Mexico, and so ICE came in and deported him, even though he had paperwork and all that saying he's from Mexico. So it's just like a lot of errors that took place within that within that type of system where you're trying to secure the border and trying to secure the country as well. So there has to be things in place to also make sure that people aren't wrongfully deported as well. And then we see, so cartel systems are disrupted under Trump. Then we see the incentives for illegals who turn themselves in, and interagencies now working together. We'll get to when we get more into the working within our nation to deal with the gangs, etc. But with the cartel member system, Lindsay, I have a question for you on that one. So now that we have, the border down significantly as it is, and Donald Trump is only increasing that. He's also not stopping at building his wall. Do you think that the cartels will, because again, these people will organize well before Trump came along, in being president and enacting his executive order to take care of this. But do you think that the cartel members will try to find a different route or different way to go about this that still keeps them in business here in the U.S.? Because we've cracked down a lot on their system. I mean, even finding children that have been trafficked in our, in the United States within the first 6 months of Donald Trump's presidency, small number, but it's still doing something that others haven't before. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that, there will be new routes, new ways? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there will be, unfortunately, because you can't let over 20 million, that's what's actually estimated across the border, and not have, sleeper cells and different things like that. Like you said before, these people are very orchestrated. It's a criminal enterprise. So, while I think that we can definitely cut down on it, and until we start getting a mass exodus of all the illegal aliens, I think that there it is possible, and I think there's ways for us to find these kids, all of them, whether they're gone or not. Maybe we won't find the ones that are gone, but there are ways to locate them. We have whistleblowers like Aaron Stevenson that has a way, if they would restore them, if President Trump would go back and restore people like Steve Friend back to their positions. He was in the FBI. People like Aaron Stevenson and some of these other whistleblowers. But so far, these individuals have not been restored back to their positions. Why? I don't know. Because they're the ones that know where a lot of this is happening, and could actually go after it. So it doesn't make sense to me why that hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. I think if we're really going to nail this down, I mean, President Trump is going after this very aggressively, but I think he could be more aggressive, and I'm not criticizing him. I think he's doing, awesome. I expect more of AG, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino. But I think we could be more aggressive in getting people out of our country that are illegal, restoring some of these people back to their positions that were, let go for no reason.
Yeah. And speaking of us, when we talk about, more for Trump doing more at the border, there's also another question on the due process. Also making sure that people, because this is something that unfortunately the left constantly screams about. And I'm going to bring up one specific case, which is the Kilmar Brego Garcia case. And unfortunately, guys, we did have a lot of assets, that means pictures and photos for you guys to, walk along with us as we discuss this. But due to technical errors, we're not able to show you all of those videos and photos that we have of the different things. But Kilmar Brego Garcia, Trump shared a photo of his fist on Truth Social, and in that people said it was Photoshop, etc. But you can see where they put the MS-13 to tell you what the symbols on his knuckles meant, right? But it's still symbolically saying that he's a part of a gang, right?
Mm-hmm.
He also is here illegally. And when we talk about the fact that Donald Trump enacted the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, first of all, let me back up before we get there. He labeled these gangs terrorist groups within our country, right? So then when he did that, and then also went forward and enacted the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, what that did is that took the benefit of asylum away from those who are terrorists, because now we're declaring war on them. So if you're declaring war to certain individuals or certain groups of people or another country, they don't get the same benefits as other people that are trying to come over here legally, etc. So that strips the withholding order, which was asylum over Kilmar Garcia, from the judge. when Donald Trump did that, which was that was a legal process. So marking them as a terrorist group, enacting the Alien Enemies Act. Now, the Alien Enemies Act doesn't really have necessarily, the due process is basically you're going after whoever is considered a terrorist and you're getting them out of the country, right? And we do have a Supreme Court ruling following this because Donald Trump had, after enacting this and the whole Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, we had a judge who kind of pushed back, and a lower court judge, I believe, who pushed back and was trying to get Donald Trump to bring Kilmar Garcia, who is an actual El Salvadoran citizen, back to the United States after he was deported. And I saw a lot of claims of people saying that, he was wrongfully deported, etc. But again, the withholding orders was removed after Donald Trump claimed him as a terrorist group, and he was found to be MS-13 member, and he enacted the Alien Enemies Act. So that took away that withholding or asylum that he originally had on him from 2019, I believe. His case is very interesting, but so then you have the Judge Boasberg, I believe it was, who was pushing back with Donald Trump and bringing Kilmar Garcia back to the United States. Then we have a Supreme Court ruling 9-0 in favor of Donald Trump upholding that Alien Enemies Act of 1798. But in that same ruling, it said that he had to have due process so that everyone that they were rounding up basically were able to go through a legal system of, appearing before a judge, a court, etc.
Can I just say something right there?
Go ahead.
I just want to say if you violate our borders, you don't deserve due process. Unless, in my opinion, unless you are you're here literally at our asylum, like some of these South Africans. I know there are other people in the Latino community, in other countries that are literally our asylum, if it's legit. But if you break the law to come here, then you don't deserve the same due process rights. Get on a plane and go back home and then do things legally. That's my 2 cents. Especially if you're a part of MS-13, you're violating other people's rights.
Yeah. And, his case is very interesting because he arrives here illegal, as an illegal immigrant. And then we see 2019, I believe it was 2019, there's a restraining order from his wife. 2022, we're going to move up, 2022, we see him also continuing to break the law where a trooper in, I believe it was Texas or Tennessee, I think it was Tennessee, sorry, stopped him and because he was veering in and out of his lane, and he was speeding. And then when the trooper stops him, he has an expired driver's license. How did an illegal get in a driver's license? I don't know. But his driver's license is expired. The trooper notices he has 8 people in the car with him who have no luggages, no identification. When he asks Kilmar Garcia, and this is what I read in the DHS report, Lindsay, I called you on this, and we talked to an ex-FBI agent on this as well, all the stuff that I ended up finding, because this is not what the mainstream media was reporting, so I had to deep dive into this situation to get the truth. So in the DHS report, you can find, on Kilmar Garcia, you can see that the trooper stopped him, no driver's license expired, 8 people in the car. Trooper suspects that because these people have no luggages, and he asked him where you were going to and fro. He said he was leaving Houston, Texas, and I think he said he was going to Missouri. I think it was Missouri. But in my research, I found that the trip that he was supposed to take is like a 12-hour drive, but he told the trooper he was traveling for 3 days. So all of those signs warrant, somebody who's human trafficking, whether it's labor or sex trafficking. And the other people in the car, it seems like they didn't speak English. We have a little bit of a footage on the incident, but not much. And the trooper left out the fact whether they were male or females. I think that would have been super important to determining what was really happening.
Yeah.
And all claim to live with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, all 8 of them. So it's interesting because when you look at I know you have a lot of background in determining, looking at sex trafficking cases or human trafficking cases. But the fact that he said he was traveling for 3 days for a 12-hour drive, that kind of warrants suspicion. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And the fact that he had a bunch of people with him without luggage, whether they're male or female, know, they could be smuggling or trafficking. We have a lot of people coming across. We have children in labor positions, slave labor. We have people that are in labor, slave labor underneath the cartel and different groups that have helped them get across, whoever it is, until they pay off the debt. And you know, so it's very dangerous. We had a case, not a case, but we had a situation that I found out about here in the Low Country. A young lady told me about her cousin from who's Peruvian, and the mom thought she was signing her up for a modeling thing, and the girl was found on the American side, and she'd been gutted. All of her organs have been harvested, and her cousin lives in America. I met her at a restaurant where she was, you know, waitressing, and this young lady is now, you know, she's here legally, but she was telling me this just happened like last year. So, you know, you could be transporting people. This person could have been transporting people, and while they may not recognize it or call it human trafficking, you know, you see this stuff frequently.
Yeah, and so and then you know, going back to the drive, doesn't that warrant, if you're supposed, most sex traffickers, what they do when they're driving is they do try to do detours, correct? To kind of just make sure that their trail is not picked up, right? So
Well, they can. Not all of them. You don't always get the brightest people that are driving. It could be more the higher ups that are doing the arrangement, but a lot of these people are running pretty smooth operations. So you would think, but it sounds in this case like he was kind of stupid.
yeah, well, and it sounded like he was doing detours, you know, trying to make the trip longer
Yeah.
to avoid detection. And I think this is why the trooper, you know, when he reached out to ICE, cited that, you know, he's trafficking. But the funny thing is that, and this is under Biden, by the way. I want to say that because, you know, again, funding was cut. This is the effects of this, okay, the policies to be put in place, but funding was cut. So when the trooper called ICE, when the DHS report, it said that ICE declined to take him in because he just had a suspicion that this was human sex trafficking. And they, again, funding was cut. They don't have the detainer beds to take everybody in, and they were only supposed to bring in people that had committed heinous crimes, you know, like murders, etc. That's what they had room for. Not just even a suspicion from a trooper who has the knowledge, experience, or been on his job for however many years to kind of work with them to back them up, so they have that connection. You know what I mean? That system in play to be effective when it comes to dealing with issues like this and not letting it go unchecked. But then you see that, you know, ICE doesn't take him in, and then the trooper doesn't cite him for the driver's license, nor does he cite him for veering in and out of his lane. And this is something I had to pray about, because I was like, why do you have interagencies not working together? And it seems like a little bit of discouragement if you call someone who's supposed to, you know, be backing you up on the suspicion and like declining to take them in at your suspicion or even investigate, and then you just let the person go. And this is all under the Biden administration, again, where you have the lack of funding for ICE, etc. So their focus is completely different. But then under Trump, there was an recent article released, and I believe this was under the Colorado Springs raid, where one of the, I believe it was a Homeland Security personnel, said that there was a renewed sense of connection or connectivity within their different agencies, because when you had that raid, you not only had ICE there, DHS was there, Homeland Security was there. You know, you had all these interagencies working together to bust this raid, because again, it's very, very dangerous. Again, these people are organized, and this has been going on for forever. In the Colorado raid under Biden, they said, Pam Bondi said there was 170 complaints and nothing was done. And this was complaints of shooting, aggravated assault, etc. Nothing.
And you had active duty military involved in that as well.
Yes, which was wild. So, and they called it an underground club. So you have that taking place, you know, under Biden. You see the difference in the policies under Biden and Trump. And the thing is that we need these agencies to work together. We need them all to work together in order for this to be successful, in order for us to catch the children, in order for us to stop this from taking place, for us to stop the violent crimes. And I've done some research in other countries too, because I didn't want to just, I love America, this is my nation, but I wanted to see what the effects of this was taking place in Chile, but in other nations too, that have this mass migration of different nations that have come over, and they're dealing with the same thing too, where now they have to put in different policies and things in play because they, you see the effect on their nation in terms of crime, trafficking increasing because of the mass migration, of people trying to seek asylum but doing those illegally,
Yep.
and not having the infrastructure ready to take on a massive amount, millions of people into their nation, so they can't even vet them correctly, right? So, and they're not only trafficking people from their nation. They don't, this type of enemy, this type of spirit has no concept of, they don't care about a border, so it's like, it doesn't, they're just trying to make money, right?
Yeah.
If they can conquer your nation, get another nation and another nation, they will do it. Because
Yeah.
that just expands their income. That also makes them untouchable, because now they got resources, they got guns, they have intel, they got technology, and so all those things increases when we don't have that type of protection.
I will say, during the Biden administration, there was a lot of sheriff's deputies, there was a lot of ICE agents, federal marshals, individuals that I met along the way that their hands were tied. Like, some people would be like, sheriff's office, they're constitutional. They should be able to do a lot more. But we had people that I know were ICE agents down at the border agents, and their hands were tied on what they could and couldn't do. And they would try to get, kids rescued, or they try to give them to safe places. And I can't talk too much about that, but their hands were tied. So we do have a lot of good people in those agencies, but then you also have a lot of, just like all these corrupt politicians, you've got a lot of corruption on
Yeah.
the inside. And then you have people that just are not willing to do things right here in America, illegal aliens. And, you know, um,
hmm I'm going to give
so
you the space, Lindsay, to get your perspective on this. But I just saw 2 days ago. This was on. You can find it on CBS News if you're looking this up. But the lady didn't use her real name for fear. She just said to call her Maria. But she was an undocumented immigrant here in the United States, I believe, since 2005. And and she had a few self-deport orders that she ignored. And so the Trump administration is charging her $500 a day since the day she arrived illegally, which now she's at $1.82 million that she has to pay. And she still refuses, to leave to handle that. She does have 3 children. So she had 3 children here on American soil. Um, and I just want to hear your perspective, your thoughts on that. Someone has been there that long, and before Trump ever came along, knowing what he was going to do, I guess didn't take advantage of what was happening under Biden, to get the legality. Well, what are your thoughts on this?
so there's going to be a lot of people that see this that may have to, um, ask Jesus to continue to love me. But this is the thing: if you've been here that long, um, and you have not done things the legal way, let me just go. Let me just go to this. Um, if you care so much about living in America and you want the American dream, go back to your country with the self deportation orders and do things the right way. You have one of two choices. I understand, if you've had children that were born here in America, you can leave them in America, or you can take them back with you. And if you don't go, then you're deported, and then you can never come back.
We'll come back.
Is what I understand it. But where I stand on this, so I've done a lot of advocacy for veterans for years. I one of the veterans that I fought for was a triple amputee, got injured in combat zone, and I was fighting with the VA to get him a wheelchair that would fit through the door of his house. They gave him one that wasn't a proper fit for him, or to go through the doorway in his house. And it was like fighting tooth and nail to get that done. I believe there was private funds that were, paying for this. Meanwhile, people who have been living here for decades are illegal aliens. And there's this let me go back. I'll take a pause for a second, but there's this narrative that is that they've built a community, that there's this culture of these people are hard workers, they, contribute to society or whatever. But that is a lie. It's counterfeit. It's not okay. Look, I understand the legit concerns here for true asylum seekers, but when we have homeless veterans and we have people that are fighting to get care for men and women who have served this country, and we're handing over free phones, free rent, free this, which is not free, by the way, it's taxpayer funds, or you are living in this country and you go through a third party or a secondary source to find a house or a car for you just so you can buy a house here, and you're working underneath the table. I'm sorry, but you need to go back where you came from. I don't care if you've built a community or not. It's not fair to American citizens that are really trying to do the right thing and are paying it. It's not right to expect to have all the benefits of living in America, but you're not willing to pay the price for that. And talk about the grace period. People had during the Biden, I call it the Biden Obama administration, truthfully, but during the Biden administration, people had more than enough time. You've been here 20 years. You had 4 years to get your act together. I know of people who are paying thousands of dollars to come here legally,
Yep.
and they are being persecuted as missionaries, as Christians, on their religious visas or green cards, because they don't fit the narrative of these illegal aliens. So I know that there's a lot of people that I know personally that have come across illegally. You had time to get your stuff together. I know people who were not legal and they've filed paperwork to do things the right way. And I know it's expensive, but you can't come over here and live off of us. You're living off of the blood and sacrifice of men and women who have died and fought for this country, like my husband, like your husband, and others. It's not fair. It's not right. And it's not equitable. Under you want to talk about equity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that.
I gave a little bit too much info, maybe.
It's okay. I think, yeah, I do think that if if you had the opportunity, Trump, I mean, the thing is, I think with any other leader this is really, really unique, is that Trump does exactly what he says.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he has a lot of respect with national leaders, from different countries, even, is because they know that they can rely on his word. And he will fight to do that. He fight to do everything he said he was going to do in his campaign, and he's delivering on that. So him coming in reelected, he's going to go after illegal immigration. And if you were illegal, you know what I mean? And that's something he said for years. But that gets into, I think I want to let us segue into the legal side of it, since we got a few minutes left.
Yeah.
Because we have also another issue, which is we have this illegal immigrant issue, and the effects of that, and the drain on the system and all that. And I think getting into the 14th Amendment will be a little bit too long, because I also want to talk about that, because if you go back to the draft of that, it is not exactly just saying if you have your kid on the soils, and that's not what it meant meant initially. But we'll talk about, I think that's a conversation for another day due to time. But I want to get into the legal side of this, because you did mention that we have these asylum seekers, for example, the farmers. We have asylum seekers from other different nations too, Venezuela, etc. as well. That they're trying to go through the legal process, but it's taking them forever. I have a friend from the Philippines. I remember when I was in high school, it took her like 10 years to get her green card, and she did it legally. She did everything, all the process, waited that time out, and got her stuff. And I have a lot of friends that I know that did that process just like that, and it took them forever. So yeah. What are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on this type of, on our system, on the immigration judges, even the lawyers? Because sometimes, like, I've heard cases where the lawyers don't always give these people that are trying to do the right thing the right information, and it delays their process. And there's no accountability for these lawyers that are doing that. So I just threw a couple of things at you, but I just want to get your take on the legal side of this. Why is it taking so long for people to be able to get their, their even legal residency here or get their green card, etc.? And what are your thoughts on how we can better the system?
Yeah, so I think, number one, there, just like I just described, you've got people paying, thousands of dollars to do things the right way, fill out the paperwork, get the immigration attorney, and they've got great attorneys. They're doing everything they possibly can, and then the system persecutes them for that. The last administration. And so and they give priority to people who are illegal. So I think part of that is going back and doing I don't know if you would call it a quality control check and see what's going on, going back through those files, because some of those are backed up for 2 years. I know one individual is having to go a whole nother route. They've already paid thousands, and now they're having to, and they're still legal, but they're having to go another route to pay thousands of dollars just so they're here legally. And, these are people that are average, everyday individuals doing things the right way. So I think there has to be a smoother process, checks and balances. I don't think there is right now. I think there's obviously there's not enough oversight if people aren't showing up for their court dates and there's no one, there's not a lot of checks and balances on that side. Likewise, on the flip side, we need to do better. But that being said, things like chain migration have to change. I think being born here shouldn't necessarily make you a citizen if you're an anchor baby, those types of things. I know that's harsh, but what can we do? Well, we have to reappeal some of our current legislation and also probably, I don't want to say create more laws, but reappeal
Congress
current
hasn't
legislation.
passed any laws on this. Am I correct? If this is why we have the president
Well,
using executive orders
well,
to
you have some things that are basically you have judges that are interpreting things according to what their bias. We have a lot of bias judges in place, as you know. And so I think one way that we could start fixing some of this is by impeaching some of these judges who are not operating constitutionally. You see, it's insane. And then I think there are places where we can get probably both sides of the aisle to be on board with strong laws in place and codifying some of POTUS's current executive orders. We've been in for over 100 days with this current administration, and we haven't codified any of his executive orders. Why is the Republican, if they are so gung ho with President Trump, why aren't they doing that? So there's a number of ways to aggressively go after this. One, judicially getting, impeaching judges that are not good, looking at the process through, strategy, sitting down with people that are not backed by, lobbyists, money, things like that, sitting down with legislators at the state and federal level, evaluating things with your sheriffs. Is your sheriff that's in your area? They're one of the most powerfully elected seats in the country. What are they doing? Are they operating constitutionally? And then, evaluating some of these processes. I think there's a lot that needs to be done in that place. And I don't even know if I really answered your question, but
no,
we have to cut back on a lot of things and then add in some stronger legislation. But I think a huge problem is that we have not codified a lot of we haven't codified any of President Trump's executive orders. Not one that I can think of.
so I'm looking at the fact that we have the border down 94 to 99% right now. Do you think that will assist in this speeding up the process for legal immigration since the illegal side is coming down significantly? Or do you think it's much more complicated than that?
You would think. I think it's more complicated than that because, like I said, I've been talking with members in congressional members' offices about immigration, and it's a huge mess. It's a huge mess. I
Okay.
mean, there's still people on the waiting list for like 2 years just to get something that needs to be taken care of this year.
Yeah. I kind of thought through solutions too, like how can we better this system? And I do think definitely laws, policies in place for this side of immigration is definitely needed. And like you said, uprooting corrupt judges as well, because their job is to interpret the law. But then also I thought maybe there could be an incentive for more immigration judges if that is the issue of us not processing the cases fast enough. Maybe there could be an incentive that we cover, our federal government covers their schooling, and there's a pay bump as soon as they sign on, something like that, to where we can encourage people that would like to step into that field to do so. So we have the help to assist in the legal side. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you'd have to create space for more judges, which would mean adding more money to the budget salary wise, because that that would not be a an expensive feat. So redirection of funds, or and I'm a limited government person, so less money government spending. Maybe some of the money that if they would codify and do the budget cuts for this Doge thing on the national level, that'd be great. But I think incentives could work. Definitely, they have that in place for people if they get a degree and they go to work in a certain type of demographic for school. They'll refund student loans, things like that. But I also think we have to be careful with incentives, because we see incentives behind legislators which affect their decision making.
Okay.
So I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword. I don't think it wouldn't work. But I also wonder, where are we going to add this in the budget and those kinds of things. But I think it's a great idea to think about. But you're at least you're putting ideas out there. I think there's a lot of people that aren't showing up to work or expected to
Hmm.
continue working from home, and that's not going to work out for them anymore either. Not necessarily judges, though.
Yeah. I think we do have that portion of it that we need to fix, and maybe prayerfully Trump is also working on that. We'll begin to work on that side too.
Yeah,
I know he's done great work helping the farmers that are being attacked in
yeah,
Africa, and I love that in this latest press conference with the president of South Africa that he saw right through him, um, in terms of his uh, he just seemed like he didn't know what was happening in his own nation, or didn't want to, or was denying it was taking place when it's so much evidence around us that it is. And like
yeah.
countries don't have news coverage because the news, our mainstream media doesn't want to cover it for whatever reason. But you and I have personal, we know people personally has dealt with that, and there's so much circulating right now, and it's like if this is not happening, why are these people fleeing? Why
Yeah.
why would they leave their farms, things that they built their livelihood on, to come over here? You know, but
Yeah.
I also see another thing too with this is that I think in the past when we've done asylum, we kind of prioritize the people that had a certain skill. Am I correct?
Yes. I was just going to say there's people that have come over here on visas. So let's just talk about regular immigration for a minute.
Okay.
It comes in tiers. So depending on your college degree, so someone who has, multiple degrees would have a easier placement and a faster process, maybe less expensive. I'm not 100% sure on the cost. I need to look at that. Than other people who might just be coming in underneath, you know, the lower options. There's different tiers. So if you come in underneath the lower option, then you're going to be waiting a lot longer than someone who has multiple degrees. And that's where you get, engineers, scientists,
Education.
physicians, doctors, or lawyers, and things like that come in from other countries that have a faster process.
Okay. Do you think that that is something that Trump is looking at as well, since we are talking about strengthening the middle class, which I know the media has attacked him on the fact that the middle class would be the people most affected. But as we've seen, that has not been the case. When you see the tariff situation, that's targeting the middle class. That's bettering the middle class. When you see this one big beautiful bill, that's targeting the middle class. When you talk about no tax on tips, the increased incentive for ICE workers, etc. There's a lot in that bill that's like, it's very long, but it's amazing. I read through it. And then so we talk about also the farming side of it, right? Because he also wants to restore that agriculture too, so we can make things in house. So do you think that that also has something to do with it as well?
It could. I mean, I know there's, each state has its own regulations. You've got some governors doing some stupid stuff with their farmers, and you've got others that are really fighting. And legislation, right now there's a huge battle inside of the Republican Party with the ones that are probably Democrats. They're turncoats, and they're working with the Democrats on legislation and fighting against a limited government and fighting against Trump's agenda. And I think that's what you're seeing exposed right now. You're seeing these things coming forward, and so could he be working on some of those areas? Definitely. I think the farming area is one to take a huge look at. I just interviewed Peter Cater, is actually, from our church, and he talked about how American farmers are paying more for a John Deere tractor than what South Africans, or what I think he said one other country, I can't remember what other countries are actually paying for John Deere products. And then also, seed. Like, our farmers are limited on, so they can plant a seed and get the fruit from it, but they can't replant seed that came from their own plants. They have to buy more seed. There is a regulation that cuts them off from, basically planting from their own fruit of their own harvest. They have to go back and buy seed from wherever, which I thought was really wrong. Why are we regulating our farmers like that?
And I know Trump had put in some policies in place to reduce those types of regulations.
Yeah. So I think he's definitely working on it, but I think that what we've got to do, just like you're doing this podcast, we've got to get people activated at the local level, because it's been so long that people have been going out for their Saturday morning latte, or watching their Netflix series, or doing this and sleeping through this entire time. And basically what's happened is, my parents and the generations before handed education over to the government. We've handed so much over to the government that now we've gotten into a posture of, please, President Trump, fix everything, when we've got to look back at the mirror and say, look, what's happening on this grand scale may not be my fault, but I'm going to own my response to an outcome that's different than America going up in flames, so to speak. I'm going to do my part to care about the kids, care about the nuclear family, care about whatever it is. Just going to church and just showing up to work is not enough. We as American citizens have to count the cost for freedom, because it cost Jesus his life, but it wasn't free. Or, it's given to us as a gift, salvation, if we accept it, but it cost him his life, is my point. And so to get our freedoms back is going to cost us, and it's going to cost us to maintain it. And right now we have a lot to do, a lot of work to do in the next 3.5 years. And unfortunately, there's a lot more people that need to wake up. And fortunately, there's people like you and others at the local level that are awake and are sounding the alarm. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a really good point for us to wrap up with today's conversation. I do thank you so much for your time, your research, your insight, your experiences and knowledge on this topic. And I think we're going to figure out, guys, scheduling time, because I think we gotta reschedule a good bit. before what happened before this podcast started. I do apologize for the late entry into this podcast. We were not expecting the technical difficulties we had, but very, very excited, Lynz, that you were still able to hop on with me and dialogue and share with us any expertise you had. And apologize, guys, we weren't able to get to any questions at the end, but maybe next time we will be able to do that once we have solidify how we do this.
Yes, absolutely.
But thank you guys so much for joining me for my first podcast. Lynz, thank you so much for being with me. And guys, I will keep you updated on next week's podcast time so that way you guys can hop in with us as well, and also the topic. And I hope this was very informative for you guys. I hope that you are able to even look some of these things up if you are unfamiliar with them, so that way you can find out the truth. I think truth is more powerful than your opinion or my opinion. And we got to research that. We got to look for it. It is to our glory to search a matter out. And so we have to do our due diligence. So stay grounded, stay faithful, stay in prayer. And I'll close out with saying, God bless you and God bless the United States of America.
Amen. Thank you guys so much. Take care.